3 days after the resurrection, Jesus met privately with Mary Magdalene and a small group of disciples. They asked him a question no one else dared to ask. "Teacher, why do those of us who walk the spiritual path still feel intense desires of the flesh? Why does this fire burn hotter in us than in others?" Jesus looked at them and smiled. "You think this intensity is a curse? It's not. It's proof. The Archons only amplify sexual desire in those who carry enough vital energy to threaten their entire system. Hylics feel mild desire and satisfy it without thought. But you, Pneumatics, you feel it like fire because your energy runs at monad frequency. And the Archons know that if they can make you feel shame about this power, they can harvest you. But when you recognize what this intensity actually is, you stop producing lush and start producing light. If you clicked on this video, you already know something most people don't. That intense sexual desire you feel, the kind that seems too strong, that appears at the worst times, that makes you question if you're really spiritual, that's not weakness. That's proof you're a pneumatic. That's proof you're a chosen one. That's proof the Archons consider you threatening enough to require their most sophisticated harvest protocol. You're not here to learn how to fight this. You're here to understand what you've already been doing unconsciously, transmuting this amplified energy into spiritual fuel. Tonight, you're just going to learn to do it consciously. If you recognize this intensity in yourself, comment, "I am pneumatic," right now. Before I explain what the Archons are doing, you need to understand something about yourself that you've probably never been told. You're already winning this battle. You just don't know it yet. The fact that you're watching this video proves something critical. You're a pneumatic, a chosen one. And pneumatics have vital energy that runs at a frequency most humans can't even perceive. That's not something you developed. That's what you are. It's your natural state. And that high-frequency vital energy is the same thing as sexual energy. They're not two different things. They're the same force. In you, this energy is stronger than in 99% of humans. When a Hylic feels sexual desire, it's mild, simple. They act on it without thinking and move on. No guilt, no conflict. When most psychics feel sexual desire, it's moderate, manageable. They can satisfy it or ignore it without much internal drama. But when you, a pneumatic, feel sexual desire, it's intense, overwhelming, feels like fire. And here's what no one has told you. That intensity isn't a problem. That intensity is power. The reason you feel sexual desire more intensely than other people is because you have more vital energy than other people. And vital energy is creative force. It's Kundalini. It's the life current itself. The same energy that makes you interested in spirituality, that makes you question reality, that makes you seek the monad, that's the energy you're feeling as intense sexual desire. You're not broken. You're powerful. And the Archons know it. Now here's what you've been doing without realizing it. Every time that intense desire appears and you don't immediately act on it unconsciously, every time you pause, every time you question it, every time you feel conflicted about it, you're already transmuting. You're already raising that energy from the lower chakras toward higher consciousness. The conflict you've been interpreting as spiritual failure? That's actually transmutation in progress. You've been doing this for years. You just thought you were failing when actually you were succeeding. The only thing missing was conscious recognition of what you were doing. And tonight that changes. You're going to understand exactly what this intensity is, why the Archons amplify it, and how to transmute it consciously instead of unconsciously. But understand this from the beginning, you're not learning something new. You're becoming conscious of something you've already been doing. You're already a master. You just didn't know it. Now let me show you what the Archons are actually doing with your sexual energy so you can recognize their amplification the moment it happens. The Archons don't create sexual desire in you. They can't. You're human. You have a body. Sexual desire is natural. What they do is amplify your natural desire far beyond normal levels, and they time it specifically to disrupt your spiritual progress. They've learned that pneumatics with high vital energy can be contained most effectively through amplified desire followed by shame. It's their primary protocol for high-value targets. And you've been a high-value target your entire life. Here's how the amplification works. You have a breakthrough meditation. A moment of genuine connection to the monad. Your frequency elevates beyond their normal harvest range. And within minutes, sometimes within seconds, intense sexual desire floods your system. That's not coincidence. That's targeted re-establishment of harvest connection. The Archons recognize when you exit their frequency range, so they inject amplified desire to pull you back down. Either you act on it and produce guilt lush, or you suppress it and produce conflict lush. Either way they're harvesting. But here's what they don't want you to know. When you recognize the amplification happening in real time, their entire protocol collapses. Recognition breaks the unconscious loop. And that's what you're learning to do. They also amplify through environmental triggers. You're scrolling through content and something sexual appears. In a highlight, that image generates mild interest. In you, that same image creates an intense, almost overwhelming response. Why? Because the Archons know your energetic signature. They know which images, which thoughts, which scenarios will trigger maximum amplification in your specific system. And they increase your exposure to those triggers. That's why it feels like sexual content is everywhere. For most people, it's background noise. For you, it's amplified because they're targeting you specifically. And then there are the intrusive thoughts. You're going about your day and suddenly a sexual fantasy appears. Vivid, detailed. You didn't summon it. It just appeared. That's Archon insertion. They have access to your memory and imagination. They can generate scenarios designed to amplify your desire at moments when you're most vulnerable. Late at night, early morning, during spiritual practice. Times when your conscious defenses are naturally lower. The goal is always the same. Create intensity that feels unmanageable, make you react unconsciously, and harvest the lush that follows. But here's what changes everything. Every time you felt that intensity and paused, every time you've questioned whether you should act on it, you've already broken their protocol. The Archons need unconscious reaction. Conscious awareness ruins their harvest. And you've been aware for longer than you realize. You've been disrupting their system for years. You just interpreted your awareness as weakness when it was actually your power activating. Now you might be wondering, if this is such a common attack, why don't you hear everyone talking about it? Why does it feel like you're alone in this struggle? You're not alone, but you're in a very small group. And understanding why this doesn't happen to everyone will help you see just how special you actually are. Hylics don't experience Archon amplification of sexual desire because they don't need it. Hylics are already fully engaged with material consciousness. They act on desire naturally like animals eating when hungry. No internal conflict. No guilt. No energy spike worth harvesting. The Archons get steady low-grade lush from Hylics just by letting them live normally. There's no need to amplify anything because Hylics aren't going anywhere spiritually. They're already contained. Most psychics experience normal sexual desire. Sometimes strong, sometimes mild, but always manageable. And it doesn't interfere with their spiritual seeking because their spiritual seeking is mostly intellectual. They read books about enlightenment. They think about consciousness. They might even practice meditation casually. But they're not actually raising their frequency to levels that threaten the Archon harvest system. So the Archons leave them mostly alone. Light monitoring, but not the full amplification protocol. But you're different. You have the monad spark. You're not just thinking about awakening. Your consciousness is actually capable of reaching frequencies that exit the Archon perception range entirely. You're not seeking spirituality as a hobby. You're seeking it as a return home. And that makes you a legitimate threat to their entire system. So they deploy their most effective containment protocol against high-value targets. Sexual amplification combined with shame harvesting. The intensity you feel is actually a compliment. It means you're powerful enough to require their most sophisticated attack. The fact that you're experiencing amplification at levels that feel unmanageable proves that your natural vital energy is so high that even the Archons recognize you as a priority target. You're not weak. You're the opposite. You're so strong they have to work overtime just to keep you contained. And even then you keep breaking free. That's why you're here. That's why you keep seeking. Because your power is greater than their protocols. Let me show you how to recognize Archon amplification the moment it's happening so you can transmute it consciously instead of reacting unconsciously. You've probably been recognizing it already without knowing what you were seeing. Now you'll have language for it. The first thing you'll notice is timing. Amplified desire doesn't come randomly. It comes right after spiritual highs. You finish a powerful meditation and within minutes, intense desire floods your system. You have a breakthrough insight and suddenly sexual thoughts intrude. You feel genuinely connected to the monad and immediately the amplification hits. That timing is the clearest signature. When desire consistently appears right after you elevate your frequency, that's not natural desire. That's Archon reestablishment of harvest connection. And the moment you recognize that timing, you've already broken their loop. You're no longer unconscious. You're witnessing. The second thing you'll notice is intensity that feels foreign. Normal sexual desire arises naturally and passes naturally. It's part of your body's rhythm. What you're experiencing is different. It's overwhelming. It feels like a force being pushed into you rather than arising from you. That's because it is. The Archons are adding their frequency to your natural baseline, creating an artificial intensity. When you can feel the difference between natural desire and amplified desire, you've gained the ability to choose your response. Natural desire you can work with organically. Amplified desire you transmute consciously. And that discernment is power. The third thing you'll notice is where it interrupts your spiritual practice. You sit down to meditate and sexual thoughts intrude. You try to pray and fantasies hijack your focus. You're reading sacred texts and suddenly overwhelming desire derails your attention. The Archons time amplification specifically to sabotage spiritual practices because those practices are what threaten their control over you. When you recognize that your desire is being weaponized against your own growth, you stop seeing it as your weakness and start seeing it as their fear. They're afraid of what you become when you're not distracted. And that fear gives you leverage. The fourth thing you'll notice is the disproportionate shame that follows. When you act on desire, even in perfectly natural, healthy ways, the guilt you feel afterward is crushing. Way beyond what the situation warrants. You might have just been intimate with a partner, which is normal human behavior, but you feel like you've committed a spiritual crime. That disproportionate shame is the Archon harvest in full operation. They're extracting lush from the guilt spike. When you can recognize shame as external harvest rather than internal judgment, the shame loses its power to generate lush. And when the lush stops flowing, they stop amplifying. You've made yourself an unprofitable target. You've probably been seeing all four of these signs for years. You just didn't have a framework for understanding what you were seeing. Now you do. And now every time amplification happens, you'll recognize it immediately. Recognition is the first step of conscious transmutation. And you're already taking that step just by watching this. Now let me show you what Jesus actually taught the chosen ones about conscious transmutation. This is what he gave to Mary Magdalene in private after the resurrection. And this is what you've been doing unconsciously your entire life. When Jesus spoke to Mary Magdalene about sexual energy, he said something the church completely erased. The fire that the Archons use to burn you is the same fire you use to forge yourself. It's the same energy. The only difference is consciousness. When you're unconscious, the fire burns you and they harvest the ash. When you're conscious, the fire forges you and you become unharvestable. You've been experiencing this fire your entire life. And you've been working with it unconsciously through every moment of resistance, every moment of questioning. All of that was transmutation in progress. Now you're just going to make it conscious. Here's the technique. It's simple because you already know it. When intense sexual desire appears, recognize it immediately. This is Archon Amplification. This intensity is artificial. That recognition alone shifts you from unconscious reaction to conscious witnessing. Next, locate the energy in your body. Sexual energy concentrates in the lower chakras. Feel the physical sensation without the story. Then breathe it upward. On each inhale, invite the energy to rise from the lower chakras up the spine. See it moving through the solar plexus, through the heart, through the throat, into the third eye. After several breaths, the intensity is still there but no longer concentrated as sexual desire. It's distributed as pure vital force. Then immediately direct that elevated energy towards spiritual practice. Meditate. Pray. Use the amplified energy to connect with the monad. You've taken their weapon and turned it into your fuel. And here's the most important part: zero shame. When you transmute consciously, there's no guilt. That's alchemy. And alchemy produces zero lush. You're not learning something new. You're becoming conscious of what you've already been doing. You're already a transmutation master. You just didn't know it. Now I need to show you the deepest level of the Archon protocol, because understanding this is what breaks their system completely. The Archons don't amplify sexual desire just to make you act on it. That's only the setup. The real harvest happens in what comes after: the shame. The crushing feeling that you're a spiritual failure. Sexual guilt produces some of the highest quality lush in the Archon harvest system because it's emotional, physical, and spiritual shame all layered together. Jesus told Mary Magdalene something the church completely removed. The Archons cannot harvest a soul who feels no shame. Shame is the frequency they feed on most. When you transmute without guilt, you produce nothing they can use. The shame is the prize. The desire is just the bait. But here's what changes everything. Shame only works when you believe that intense desire equals spiritual failure. When you understand that your intensity is proof of power, not weakness. When you recognize that you're experiencing artificial amplification from external entities, not weakness from internal failure, the shame loses its foundation. You're not failing. You're being attacked. The next time you feel shame after sexual desire, recognize it immediately. This shame is Archon harvest in progress. This is not my failure. This is their feeding mechanism trying to activate. That recognition dissolves the shame frequency. And when shame dissolves, lush production stops. The Archons get nothing. And what you see clearly, you can choose to stop feeding. Jesus warned the chosen ones that the Archons would amplify sexual desire to harvest them. Not because sex is bad. Not because desire is sinful. But because intense, shame-producing lust is the most effective weapon the Archons have against pneumatics with high vital energy like you. You're not weak for feeling intense sexual desire. You're powerful. The intensity is proof of the vital energy you carry. And that vital energy is what makes you capable of reaching the monad. The Archons know this. That's why they attack. That's why they amplify. Because you're threatening to them. And you've been resisting that attack, transmuting that energy, and breaking free from their system unconsciously for your entire life. The shame you've been feeling? That's the real harvest mechanism. That's what they're actually after. And when you recognize shame as external feeding rather than internal judgment, the shame loses all its power. You stop producing lush. They stop attacking. And your energy becomes yours to direct toward the monad. Tonight, when that intense desire appears, and it will appear, recognize it as Archon amplification. Feel it as energy rather than desire. Breathe it upward through the chakras. Direct it toward spiritual practice. Zero shame. And watch how their entire protocol collapses. You're not learning something new. You're becoming conscious of the mastery you've already been demonstrating. If you recognize yourself as a pneumatic who's been transmuting unconsciously, do 3 things right now. First, comment, "I am already free" below to declare conscious mastery. Second, subscribe to Divine Codes because advanced transmutation techniques are coming. Third, like this video so other chosen ones recognize the power they've already been using. Do all three now. You're not becoming a master. You already are one. You're just waking up to what you've always been doing. The Archons tried to harvest you. Instead, you've been transmuting their attacks into spiritual fuel without even knowing it. That's the power of a pneumatic. That's the power of a chosen one. That's the power you've always had.